My name is Stephanie Allen. I was born and raised in a quiet suburb in Oregon. From the outside, my family looked like the picture of middle-class American life. A house with a lavender-filled front yard, a neat white picket fence, and cozy family dinners under warm lighting. But inside, things were far from as pleasant as they appeared. I was the firstborn of my parents, Mark and Linda Allen, both firm believers in modern parenting methods. My father, a software engineer with a passion for math, always dreamed of having a brilliant, exceptional child. My mother, she once told her friends she had read over 40 books on child psychology before I was born. I was brought into this world with high expectations, monitored, measured, and experimented on like a research project. But by the time I turned 3 and still couldn't count to 20 or write my name properly, Mom's disappointment became obvious. "Mark, I don't think she's capable of learning as fast as we hoped," she said, a mix of frustration and caution in her voice. "We need to intervene early so we don't miss the golden stage." My dad just nodded slightly, but I remember how he looked at me that day. Like I was a math problem that yielded the wrong answer, not worth solving any further. When I was 4, my younger sister Claire was born. And from that moment on, everything at home changed. Mom seemed to become a different person. Every corner of the house was filled with brain-boosting toys, emotion flashcards, and advanced learning tools you'd only find in elite education centers. I still remember that afternoon. I was quietly building Lego blocks in the corner of the living room when Mom walked by, glanced at me, and sighed. "Claire is only 7 months old and already responding to 3-step sequences. Never mind, keep playing." Claire had a musical high chair, imported fabric books from Sweden, and a private Montessori tutor before she turned 2. And me? I had pre-printed workbooks, a stubby pencil, and daily reminders that I needed to try harder if I wanted to achieve anything. When I was 8, I won 2nd place in the school-wide art competition. I brought my painting home, bursting with excitement. Mom glanced at it and said, Well, Claire read an entire short story in English today." Dad didn't say anything. He was busy installing a logic puzzle board for Claire downstairs. I learned not to expect anything. No praise, no rewards, no proud glances. I slowly became a shadow in my own family. Present, but never really seen. The breaking point came in the fall of the year I turned 12. I had always had my own room. The upstairs one with the window that overlooked the small forest behind our house, where morning light filtered through the blinds in soft beams. I loved that room. It was the only place where I felt like myself. One evening, just after I finished my homework and was hanging up a new drawing on the wall, Claire barged in. "Mom says I'm moving up here. This room's bigger, and I need space for my new study corner." I looked at her, thinking it was a joke. "No," I said firmly. "This is my room." Claire shrugged and walked out. Less than 24 hours later, when I got home from school, everything had changed. My things had been moved into the smaller room next to the laundry room. The old room now had Claire's name on it, packed with new learning equipment and a pristine white study desk. I walked into the new room. Tiny, cramped, and cold. The bed touched the wall. The desk was too small for both my books and a lamp. I stood there, fists clenched, choking back tears. "Mom," I called. "Why would you do this? That was my room. I've had it since I was little." She didn't even turn around. "You're older now. You should learn to give way. Claire needs it more. Don't make a scene, Stephanie." I didn't answer. I walked back in, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The light from the hallway spilled through the crack under the door, pale and unfamiliar. For the first time, I felt it clearly. In that house, I was the afterthought, despite being the firstborn. By the time I reached senior year of high school, life in the Allen household still revolved around Claire. She was now a top student at a prestigious private high school, chauffeured in a brand new SUV with a private tutor visiting twice a week. And me? I still attended public school, walked to class every morning, and handled everything on my own, from academics to extracurriculars. I never complained. I was used to being behind the spotlight. But I wasn't prepared for the moment when every last illusion of fairness was shattered, right at the dinner table. That night, my grandparents, Arthur and Helen, came to visit. They were the only ones in the family who ever made me feel seen, heard. We were eating Mom's lasagna, and Claire was going on and on about her summer program plans at Stanford. "That's wonderful," Grandma Helen smiled, then turned to me. "And what about you, Stephanie? Have you thought about college yet?" I looked up, for the first time feeling hopeful that I might get to share something of my own. "I applied to the University of Oregon and UC Davis. I just got accepted into Oregon's business program. Partial scholarship. If I get more financial aid, then—" I didn't even finish before Mom set down her fork and knife. The sound echoed sharply. "Stephanie," she said, her voice tight, "your father and I have talked. We can't provide more help with your tuition this year." I blinked. "What?" Dad jumped in as if rehearsed. "We need to prioritize Claire. She's been invited to an Ivy League prep program. It's a rare opportunity." My heart sank. "So, all the college savings you said were for both of us are going to Claire?" Mom sighed like she was stating the obvious. "Claire has real potential. You, Stephanie, might want to consider starting at community college and transferring, or taking time to work isn't a bad option either." "Not a bad option?" It took me a moment to realize they were completely cutting me off. The room went silent. No one spoke, except for the quiet clink of Grandma Helen's spoon against her plate. "Linda," she said, her voice low but firm. "Both girls are my granddaughters. I can't sit here and watch one be cast aside." Mom pursed her lips. "Mom, this isn't—" "Yes, it is," Grandpa Arthur interrupted. "It absolutely is our business." That night, as I was clearing dishes in the kitchen, Grandma Helen came over, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to carry this burden anymore," she said. "We'll pay for your college tuition. All of it. No loans needed." I turned, eyes red. "But that's too much money." "It's not too much when it's an investment in someone who tries," she smiled gently. "You don't need favoritism to shine, Stephanie. You've already done it on your own." That fall, I moved into the dorms at the University of Oregon. The day I left home, Mom gave me a half-hearted hug at the door and said, "Be frugal, and don't expect anything from us." Claire didn't even look up from her phone. I stepped out of that house, dragging my suitcase across the front yard path, feeling like I had just opened a new door. One without condescending stares or bitter comparison. College was a different world. There, I wasn't the average kid, no longer the shadow behind a self-proclaimed genius. I was Stephanie Allen, a business student with a sharp mind and an unbreakable spirit. Professors praised my strategic thinking. Friends came to me for help with assignments, and every weekend night I called my grandparents to tell them about every small step forward I made. My parents didn't call. They didn't check in either. And strangely, I wasn't upset. I didn't need it anymore. I had stopped seeking validation from a place where it was never freely given. What I had now was real value, one that came from within. I entered my senior year of college with a sense of certainty I had never dared to imagine. Thanks to late-night study sessions in the library, part-time shifts at a small downtown cafe where I learned how customers really think, and hours spent devouring every investment model I could find online, I started to get noticed. One of my finance professors, Dr. Elgin, referred me to a competitive summer internship at a well-known investment firm in Seattle, Bradley and Lane Capital. I still remember the first interview. Glass conference room, gleaming oak table, and 3 managers sitting across from me, each holding my resume. "Allen," one of them asked, "what do you think is the most important factor when creating an investment strategy?" I replied, "Understanding, not just the data, but the psychology behind it." They glanced at each other and nodded. I got the offer. And from that summer on, everything changed. After graduating with honors and having a research project published in a financial journal, I was offered a full-time role at Bradley and Lane as a junior investment analyst. I worked tirelessly, learning everything from risk reports, shareholder presentations, to how to read between the lines in volatile market charts. 3 years later, during a routine review of a high-net-worth client portfolio, I discovered something troubling. A group of tech stocks our firm had heavily invested in showed signs of artificial growth. The internal indicators looked unusually strong compared to the overall market. Most analysts saw it as breakout potential, but I didn't. I spent 2 sleepless nights combing through every number, tracing back appendix reports, and finally uncovered the truth. Those companies were inflating revenue through internal transactions, essentially buying their own products to fabricate sales. If we didn't pull out in time, we'd lose at least $32 million, 0 cents, in client funds. I couldn't stay silent. That Monday morning, I walked into the executive boardroom with a 42-page analysis and a risk simulation model. No one interrupted. When I finished, the CFO sat in stunned silence before turning to the CEO and saying, "She just saved the company." Within 3 days, the entire portfolio was restructured according to my proposal. And 6 months later, not only had we avoided a massive loss, but the firm reported an 11.4% growth, the highest in 7 years. I was promoted to lead investment strategist. But I didn't stop there. I started using my after hours to develop a risk scoring system based on market behavior, integrating factors like consumer psychology, social media trends, and global political shifts. It was the kind of thing the industry always called unquantifiable. I called it PRISM. At first, PRISM was a personal project. But after it accurately predicted price swings in 3 major stock groups ahead of key events, upper management took notice. A year later, the system was officially integrated into the firm's core strategy, helping Bradley and Lane surpass 2 of its top competitors in the sector. I still remember the day I was called into the senior boardroom. The CEO, Richard Langley, smiled at me once everyone was seated. "Stephanie," he said, "we're creating an entirely new position, Chief Strategic Investment Officer. And no one is more deserving than you." I could hardly breathe. Just 4 years earlier, I was told I might want to work for a while and figure things out later. That role wasn't just a title. It was proof of everything I had overcome. From being the forgotten child in my own family to becoming the one leading the table in a multi-million-dollar firm's boardroom. That evening, I didn't celebrate with champagne or a party. I went to my grandparents' house, a simple red brick home filled with warmth. Grandma Helen was baking, and Grandpa Arthur was making tea. I laid the appointment letter on the table. They looked at each other and smiled. "Little Stephanie," Grandpa said, now leading the way. I looked at him, then at Grandma, the first person who believed I didn't have to be exceptional to be worthy. For the first time, I didn't need anyone's approval. I had already proven it. To myself. With quiet grit, relentless effort, and unwavering belief. After accepting the role of Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane, I knew I needed to mark the moment. Not with grandeur, but with a small, warm gathering for those who had stood by me. My grandparents, a few close friends, a couple of trusted colleagues. When I mentioned the idea to my mother, she immediately offered. "You should let us host it. Do it at home, make it more intimate, the family can reunite too." I hesitated, but she continued. "You just need to send the money for catering and decorations. I'll handle the guest list and everything else." I was unsure, but thought maybe, after all these years, this could be our chance to start over. I transferred $3,500, 0 cents to her account, and didn't ask further. A week later, when I arrived at the old house in Salem, the place where I'd grown up, slowly fading behind Claire's shadow, I never expected to walk into a perfectly staged performance. The house was more lavishly decorated than I imagined. White orchids covered the dining tables, soft golden ribbons wound up the staircase, and the scent of gourmet dishes filled the air. I saw my grandparents by the small bar, chatting with a few relatives. Claire descended the stairs in a striking red satin dress, face perfectly made up. Walking beside her was a tall, polished man I didn't recognize. People began gathering around, and just as I raised my glass to speak, my mother stood abruptly, beaming. "Dear family," she announced, "we're here today not just to reconnect, but to celebrate something truly special. Claire and her boyfriend Andrew are officially engaged." Cheers and applause erupted. I stood frozen. I turned to my mother. Her eyes passed over me like I was just another guest at a party I had paid for. I stepped forward to speak, but my father intercepted, gripping my wrist like a period at the end of a sentence. "Don't ruin this," he muttered, voice sharp as steel. "If you make a scene now, don't expect anything else from this family. No contact, no inheritance, nothing." I pulled his hand off mine and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to leave, to let them drown in their own play. But the other part, the one that had lived too long in the shadows, refused to stay silent. I returned to the center of the room, raised my champagne glass, and said, "Excuse me, everyone. May I have just a moment?" All eyes turned to me. Claire paused mid-step. My mother's brow creased. "This gathering today," I began, calm but clear, "was planned to celebrate a major milestone in my life. I was recently named Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane, a major financial firm in Seattle." I paused, scanning the room. "I'm the one who sent the money for this event. My mother agreed to organize it, and never once mentioned it would be turned into an engagement party." Murmurs rippled through the room. My grandparents stood still, stunned. "I'm not against Claire's engagement," I continued. "What I can't stay silent about is the fact that my own family tried to erase me from my own moment, just like they did all throughout my childhood." Andrew turned to Claire, confusion in his eyes. "You told me this was just a family gathering." Claire's face flushed. "Andrew, I just wanted to wait for the right time." "By using your sister's money to stage your big reveal?" he cut in, voice lowering. "I came here expecting to feel welcomed, not to watch someone be pushed out of their own moment." He set his glass down and walked away. Claire chased after him, in vain. The room fell into suffocating silence. My father stood, face red with anger. "You should know your place, Stephanie. This is still—" "No," I interrupted. "This is a place built on favoritism. It's not a home anymore." I turned to my grandparents. They hadn't moved. Grandma Helen's eyes shimmered, and Grandpa Arthur gripped my hand as I stepped toward them. "I don't need the rest of this family to know who I am." And I walked out the door, the same one I had once left in silence, but this time my head was held high. Andrew left the party without a word, leaving behind Claire's panicked gaze and a stunned family. She chased him to the porch, but the car door shut before she could say anything. The Mercedes taillights disappeared behind the trees, leaving the room in a silence that had once been filled with laughter. Claire turned back, her tears quickly replaced by fury. "You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand seeing me happy, so you destroy everything." I stood still. I didn't respond. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt, just tired. Of the same tired blame, played like a broken record. "Claire," Grandma Helen said, voice calm but sharp, "you made your choices. Don't dump the consequences on your sister." My mother rushed forward, face pale with rage and embarrassment. "Stephanie, who do you think you are to humiliate your sister in front of our family?" "I don't need to think," I replied quietly. "I just told the truth, and I've stayed quiet long enough." My father grabbed my mother's hand, trying to hold her back, but his eyes were blazing. "If you walk out of here today," he said, his voice ice cold, "you're no longer part of this family. Don't expect an inheritance. Don't expect to ever call us again. As far as we're concerned, you never existed." I was about to speak when Grandpa Arthur, who had silently observed the entire evening, suddenly stepped forward, his voice ringing out like a bronze bell in the quiet room. "David, if you're going to cut Stephanie out of this family, then it's time we clarify a few things." Grandma Helen took his hand and stepped forward with him. My mother looked at them, as if sensing something was coming. "We updated our will 3 months ago," she said calmly. "The entire estate, the house, the savings, the investment shares, it's all going to Stephanie." My mother let out a shocked gasp. "What?" "We've seen enough," Grandpa Arthur said. "Enough to know who lives by their values and who lives off of being coddled." "Claire is my biological daughter," my mother nearly screamed. "Why her?" "Because she's the only one in this family who never demanded anything, never complained, and never stepped on others to lift herself up," Grandma Helen replied, her voice trembling slightly but her eyes steady. "We don't reward favoritism or deceit." Claire burst into tears, her pride unraveling. She ran up the stairs, her red dress flaring like a bleeding stroke on a collapsing painting. My mother stood in the middle of the room, lips trembling. My father turned away, silent. I clutched my purse, looking at my grandparents, heart swelling. I never asked for this. I don't need the inheritance." "We know," Grandpa Arthur said, smiling. "And that's exactly why you deserve it more than anyone." I looked around the house, once a wound, now a stage for truth to come to light. One by one, the relatives rose from their seats, avoiding my gaze as if they had just awakened from a misguided dream. No one stopped me as I turned to leave. I stepped outside, the spring night breeze brushing my cheek, carrying the familiar scent of apple blossoms from the backyard. I heard the door shut behind me. This time, it wasn't a door slamming shut. It was a final chapter, closing on years of endurance. On the drive back to my grandparents' home, Grandma Helen reached over and gently took my hand. "You don't have to fight to prove yourself anymore, Stephanie," she said. "Now you get to just be." I looked at her, eyes stinging. I had never felt so at peace. Not because of the money, not because of recognition, but because, for the first time, I had chosen myself over chasing approval from people who never truly wanted to see me. 3 years have passed since that night, the night I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, carrying the truth, the pain, and the strength I never knew I had. I never looked back, and never felt the need to. During those 3 years, I poured my heart into my work at Bradley and Lane. Every early morning before sunrise, every quiet night on the 19th floor. There I was, refining strategy, tweaking the Prism algorithm, listening to the market, and leading my team through moments that once felt impossible. When the current CEO, Richard Langley, announced his retirement, no one expected him to choose me as his successor. But to me, it wasn't luck. It was the result of every effort, every sleepless night, and every hard decision I had ever made. On the day I was officially appointed CEO of Bradley and Lane Capital, I was 30 years old, the youngest female CEO in the firm's 60-plus-year history. The announcement took place in the main hall, camera lights flashing, every seat filled with shareholders. I stood on that stage, not to impress, but to represent a new generation, one that doesn't have to be born into glory to create its own. After the speech, I took out my phone and called my grandparents. "I did it," I whispered, voice thick with emotion. Grandpa Arthur laughed on the other end, and Grandma Helen repeated the words I'll never forget. "You've always been worthy, Stephanie, from day one." Meanwhile, 40 miles away, in the town of Salem where I grew up, things hadn't changed much. Claire was now 27. She no longer wore the engagement ring, nor held a steady job. After Andrew walked away that night, her life spiraled through one failed attempt after another. She dropped a fashion course, saying it was too much pressure, tried being a content creator but quit because no one gets my style, and eventually moved back in with our parents. Into the same room she once took from me. I haven't spoken to my parents since that night. Sometimes my grandparents mention that they've asked about me through mutual friends, but I don't care anymore. I've learned that not every relationship is meant to be kept, especially when it's built on denial and selfishness. Every Sunday afternoon, I visit my grandparents for dinner. We toast bread, flip through old photo albums I once thought were buried forever. Grandma Helen still tells little stories from my childhood, and Grandpa Arthur pretends not to remember them, just so I have to retell every detail. One time, I asked them if they ever regretted leaving everything to me. "We didn't leave it because of what it was worth," Grandma said. "We left it to the one who understood the value of choice, the one who chose integrity over convenience, silence when it mattered, and voice when it counted." I smiled, because I knew that was the greatest inheritance they gave me. Not assets, but faith. One spring afternoon, as I was leaving the office after a global strategy meeting, I saw someone waiting in the main lobby. I squinted, then realized it was Claire. She looked thinner, her gaze uncertain, but still wore her signature look. Designer coat and polished heels. "I'm not here to apologize," Claire said immediately, like a shield. I just want to know how you're doing so well, without anyone lifting you up." I looked at her, not angry, not pitying, because I once had nothing, Claire, and that's when I learned to stand on my own. "That's something you've never had to do." Claire stared at me for a long moment. She said nothing, then turned and walked away. I don't know if she'll ever change, but I do know I'll never go back to being the sister who always yielded, always endured, always stayed silent to keep the peace. I walked back to my office, where my team was waiting to build something new together. And I knew then, no matter where the path starts, as long as you don't abandon yourself, the destination will always be worth it. My story isn't just about overcoming favoritism in a family. It's a testament to the power of perseverance and inner worth. I was once overlooked, pushed aside in my own celebration, but I chose to rise. Not out of spite, but out of truth and dignity. Today, I no longer seek validation from those who once denied me, because I've found my place among those who truly believe in me, and more importantly, I've learned to believe in myself. What do you think about Stephanie's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it exactly what she deserved after everything she endured? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come.